Hi, welcome to the channel and welcome to this video. Over the last few days I've been covering F3, F2, and now we're getting to F1. My previous things had been I was setting a 10-minute video and I was talking about them. As anyone who'll tell you who watched them will know, I kind of failed a bit to cover them in those 10 minutes. May have gone over a little bit. And this is Formula 1. So how quickly am I going to have to rush through this to try and get it done in 10? We'll find out how far we get, I guess. Right. Okay, we're good. Now, I have 10 minutes set on there. You can see that. Hopefully so. And we are go. Right, we'll start off with the champions, Mercedes and Lewis Hamilton. This was more interesting. I've done this the other way, but hey. Honestly, coming out of the blocks this year, they're looking every bit as good as they've looked in the last few seasons. And it's interesting that even though they've had like the most dominant car and don't really need to do too much, they could have started this year with the car they finished last year and still be running very competitively. But even with all that going on, they still came up with things like the DAS system just to shift the game over, which points to motivation and belief like you need to have to be as competitive and run how they have for so long. They're impressive, and Lewis has every bit become the championship driver who knows how to play percentages, when to take risks, how to maximise every opportunity, and quite frankly, he's going to be bloody difficult to beat again this year. Valtteri is a guy who, on his day, can win. You know, he's beaten Lewis several times in races, but the problem is he needs to be his best day every day to be able to beat Lewis over a season, and I don't think he can do that. But you know, you wish him best in his efforts. Seb, it depends which Seb turns up, because the way he was sounding after the announcement that he and Ferrari were going to be going their separate ways, he sounded a bit as not defeated, but using terms like, you know, with the situation that's going on with COVID, it does tend to make you think about your priorities, rearrange them and think of them differently. Tends to suggest that he's fallen a little bit out of love with F1. And is possibly enjoying the home life and being around the kids and stuff. On the other hand, he could just decide, right, this is my last effort, I'm going to go for broke, and be charging, raring to go Seb. Opinions are divided about this. It could kind of go a bit either way, but makes the season more interesting. Charles Leclerc, as everyone knows, I am a Charles Leclerc fan. I think he is a very gifted driver, but I don't think he's the finished package yet. I think by his own setting, you know, he enjoyed having Seb as a teammate because Seb had a good technical understanding of the car. Seb is kind of has an interest in engineering himself or what have you, so he would ask questions that possibly wouldn't have occurred to Charles. So it'll be interesting to see how it goes this year and how much Charles has learnt last season and where he can pick up and progress himself without having Seb next to him in the car potentially. But so he's a guy who will win championships in the future if the car is capable of winning the championships. Max Verstappen is never dull. You know, you hear the commentator talking about Max, you're always expecting something to happen. You know, he's just that kind of driver. He's a very exciting driver. You know, he is. I think he could possibly be the main challenger to Lewis this year, which, you know, put my Ferrari hat aside to try and be objective for a second. Alex Albon, he's got a lot to prove this year, I think. Basically, he needs to, while he doesn't need to be Max, he does need to be in the fight with the Ferraris and trying to knock points off them and trying to take points away from Valtteri, maybe. He needs to be mingling and mixing it up with the others in the top six. which he should do because he's had more time with the car, more time to get used to the team, more time to gel, which last year was just him getting chucked around from left to right, so he didn't really get the settling in period that most drivers would get. So I don't think we've seen the best of Alex yet. Carlos Sainz, moving to Ferrari obviously next year, but him and McLaren seem to have split very amicably, and as much as possible I don't think McLaren, especially in their fight with especially in their fight with Racing Point and Renault, are going to be wanting to sacrifice points by not backing him. They'll want to treat him fair the whole way, I should imagine, because he's solid and reliable point scorer. Done very well for them last year, which is why he's now been offered a contract at Ferrari. So I fully expect he'll be with the sharp end of the midfield again. Lando Norris, I think he got a little bit unlucky last year. I don't think the points gap between him and Sainz was entirely reflective, but Sainz's greater experience did show through. I actually think Lando, not wanting to sound like a Lando stan here, but I've followed his career since 2016. I actually think Lando probably has more potential than Carlos does, and in the years to come, maybe better. But currently, the experience that Sainz has gives him the edge. Daniel Ricciardo, settling in time at Renault, that's all gone a bit out of the window. There's been a lot of talk about, between various people as to whether he'll even see the season out, because him and Cyril already don't like each other very much. I think it's only going to take a couple of races where things don't go to plan before they're seriously not talking to each other. So that could end up all going completely wrong. Esteban Ocon, he's been out of the car for a year and a half, not racing properly now, so that could go anyway. There's no way of saying that, but he's a talented guy, so as soon as he's up to speed, he should be doing stuff, and obviously Renault will probably be throwing the majority of their support behind him. So I can see him finishing ahead of Daniel by the season's end, which I wouldn't have said a couple of months ago. Sergio Perez, if there's a podium going, spare or one open, you can see him getting it. The Tracing Point, as it's called, or the pink Mercedes. Just because it won a title last year doesn't mean at the point that they started copying it that it might still be that competitive. And it looked good in testing, but Mercedes' ability to get on top of it and the way it was, and they'll have fitted upgrades since Racing Point decided to base their ideas on how it looked. So the version Racing Point have got is not necessarily the end result. So while in theory it could get potentially podiums and what have you, on the other hand, the possibility for development might be less than other teams. So the more races in the season, the longer the season goes in, they might slide down the competitive order again, especially with how it's been with the big gaps, and nobody really knows where the competitive order is at the moment. Lance Stroll, if he sorts out his Saturdays, he'll be fantastic, but we've been saying that for about 2 years now, and it still hasn't happened. So we want to see him achieve what he clearly can achieve, but there's something in the way, and that is on a Saturday he just doesn't turn up. Pierre Gasly, tale of two Gaslys last year. First part of the year, could not get comfortable with the car, struggling to make it work. Had his better moments, but not consistent enough form, and every time you thought he was an improvement, he then took a step back. And then he got dropped, and suddenly it's like, oh, hello, Pierre Gasly has come back, and he started doing amazing things in the Toro Rosso. So how he does in the AlphaTauri this year, I think him and his teammate Daniel need to have cracking seasons, basically, because they're not looking at necessarily getting back into the Red Bull even at this point, because that's all on Alex, how Alex does. They're going to be looking more behind them at guys like Yuri Vips, who I'd like to see in that car eventually. But they're wanting to do well almost to put themselves on the market if some team like Haas decides they want to drive a change. If you can do well in the AlphaTauri, then you'll do well in a team like that. So it's just advertising themselves to the wider market, I think, at this point, for both him and Daniel Kivat, who's kind of the same boat. They're both ex-dropped boys of Red Bull, and they're only still in Formula One because of the lack of other alternative options, you kind of feel, unfortunately. But yeah, looking past them, and we go on to Alfa Romeo. Kimi Raikkonen, I think it depends just how Kimi's going to feel this year, because he might come back in and, having had the break, be pumped and ready to go and be absolutely motivated. On the other hand, the time he's had at home with his family, he might just think, I can't be bothered with this anymore. I like the racing, but the being away from the family, the travelling around, the whatever, it's a bit, especially as Rom gets older, starts school and stuff, he's going to be seeing a lot less of him. So I can see him just being a bit done with it, to be honest with you, after the end of this season. Gio has an absolute point to prove. There's so many drivers from the Ferrari Academy alone nipping at his heels, wanting that seat, that basically he needs to have a great performance. He needs to prove that, he can be the guy who can sit there and, a solid benchmark for Robert Schwartzman or Mick Schumacher or Marcus, hopefully, who might come up into that seat to be beside him if he can keep hold of it. Four left, I'll continue quickly. K-Mag has great performance, is an aggressive driver, can be quite an exciting one sometimes. Give him the car, he can do good work. Romain Grosjean, which Roman's going to turn up? Because the Roman with 10 podiums, or the Roman who crashed into the pit wall coming out of the pits in Silverstone. You want it to be the former, but you're always expecting it to be the latter, which is a pretty shame for the way his career is likely to be remembered. Because more often than not, he's been better than that, but it's always the bad moments you remember. George Russell, people are counting the days to wanting to see him in the Mercedes. He done everything he could do with the Williams last year, but with Robert Kubica coming into the team, having been out of Formula One so long, and with his injury, he's not the Robert of old. There's no way of judging really how well George did. From his testing that he's done in the Mercedes, you say that he's clearly very talented. From his junior days, you'd know was very talented in them. But that doesn't necessarily mean you'll do well at the sharp end in Formula One. And so while we all think he's a potential future world champion and that he could crack it, and in the Mercedes he'd be doing really, really well, until he's actually in it, there's no way of saying for definite that, this is, he's got it. He should do, but we don't know with enough certainty yet. Personally, I think he will, but there you go. Nicholas Latifi, always such a difficult one to judge. His junior career didn't really show massive amounts. When you hear he's going to get into Formula One, it's not the name that excites you, but he's apparently a very nice guy, not that necessarily counts for everything, but again, it's that thing of being able to drive one car one way doesn't necessarily mean you can't drive a different car a different way. He might come into Formula One and the F1 car will suit his driving style perfectly, and he might be properly competitive. And you can't hope for him it does turn out that way. Or he could be trailing around the back of the grid on his own, and that would just be unfortunate. But at this point, until he actually goes racing and does some laps in a Formula 1 car, it's very hard to tell how that's going to go. Personally, I think he'll be about as competitive as the Williams allows him to be. However competitive that will be with all the issues they've had going on. Because the thing is, even if they were running close to the Haas and the other teams prior to COVID-19, obviously with all the issues they've had since then, the loans, are we going to be sold, are we going to whatever else, how much has the team's mind and money been on actually trying to upgrade and improve the car compared to, say, some of the other teams? But we'll see. My opinions on the season is it's probably going to be between Lewis and Max. I would love, absolutely, of course, for Ferrari to be up there. I doubt they were as in trouble as testing showed. But it's difficult to be optimistic at this point. So I'm it's going to be difficult for Lewis not to win his 7th championship, I think. But, we'll see how it all goes, and that's the joy of it, F1 is nothing but, if it was absolutely predictable and everything went as expected, nobody would watch it. So we'll see how it goes. Anyway, thank you for watching. Leave your comments in the bit below. Good night. Bye-bye.